Good day, all who is present. Our greetings at the event, which is called Will Please Have a Voice in the Supervisory Board of JSC or Ukrzaliznytsia. I'm Vitaliy Dudin. I am a representative of Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung office in Ukraine, and along with our new research, which is about corporate management, we will consider whether are any modern approaches when participation of employees when company management. I want sincerely express my thankful words to the opportunity to present our research that was held in 2025 year, and the authors are as follows. Are Iryna Antsyfrova, head of the Human Rights NGO in the field of education fundamentals of consciousness. Thank you, Iryna, for being present with us. Vitaliy Dudin, Ph.D. project coordinator of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung in Ukraine. This is myself, Kateryna Izmaylova, head of Youth Council of the Trade Union of Railway Workers and Transport Builders of Ukraine 2022 until 2025. She was responsible, and Yana Simurina, Ph.D. professor leading research of the Department of Civil Law Sciences of the correlates Institute of the State and Law of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, national expert of the Council of Europe. As you can see, our author's composition is includes people with different background, but all of us are interested to know what's happening in the sphere of corporate management, in particular company, which can be called as national treasure. It represented itself really well when evacuation of millions of people, when it was a question of delivery of different goods, and this is about the necessity in our country. With this, we believe that big companies shall follow leading standards of corporate social responsibility, and this must include not just meeting of interests, but also it must include the interests of the employees. Surely, JSC Ukrzaliznytsia is the result of corporate changes in corporate sector. Now this company functions at, let's say, at the basis where there is an owner who is a state, and they are also different authorities of corporate management. This is supervisory board, which is the head of management, and there is another authority which is called management. And as European experience shows, at supervisory boards, there are representatives of employer as well as representatives of employees, and we believe that this is like sort of sport in Ukraine, as we keep having some new joint stocks which are under state ownership, but representation of employees' interest is not met in full. With this, I'd like to remind that now in Ukraine we have hard discussions about supervisory board, their roles, about who must be at their roles. And in society we have a consensus when saying that when they are closed, they hide, let's say, something, and division of funds may cause some suspicions when not appropriate use of funds, and these may damage the trust to the company. With this, we shall introduce as much as possible a wider circle, including supervisory board. We believe that with great investment, let's say, for the well-being of Ukrainians, then employees, they must be introduced in this authority. Why, with which grounds, and in which forms, let us tell you a little later. Moreover, we draw your attention on provision of well-balanced approach when forming supervisory boards. This means there shall be not representatives of financial department, because these may lead when avoiding another conflicts. So not to lose time for some arguments when labor questions, then we shall have well-balanced decisions which will include the needs of employers and employees. In the end, I'd like to say that the questions we are discussing, they are somehow switching the mindfulness of people, and it's not about, because it's not just about the employment, but it's also about different labor layers. And let's say this is about social agreement, let's say. So if millions of people nowadays they share their time and sometimes health, their life, then they deserve when they vote exception because they donate their health here and life. And this is also about JSC Ukrzaliznytsia. Thus, I will briefly draw your attention to our agenda of our presentation, and then I pass the floor to Pani Iryna Antsyfrova. She will tell you more about corporate management and what are the particularities as of now in Ukraine. So our presentation has the main elements, which is particularities of legislation when corporate management in Ukraine, problems, issues when forming of supervisory board members, JSC Ukrzaliznytsia, international European standards, with the rights of employees when participating in management. And to sum up our speech, there will be another part with some conclusions. So this is about a question why inclusion of employees to corporate management is that important. So, Pani Iryna, the floor is yours. And here. My greetings. I'd like to say for the beginning that why this topic is essential, why it's that important. One of the reasons, because Ukraine moves in the direction of the EU, and we have some requirements, which is clear. Yeah, we shall correspond, we shall follow the rules of business leading, and they are set in the countries which are better economically developed, and they are. It's about corporate management. This is a system that lets you to reach the goals and to be developed in that direction, which is having something in common when you talk also about development of enterprises in EU. This means this is a corporate management, which is the system of some rules, let's call so, with the help of which you can set the goal, then ways of implementation of the goals. And this is also about monitoring of what is the quality when reaching these goals. This means this is a system of good quality management. One of the key principles says that this system determines trustful relationships between business partners, between business and governments, other stakeholders. So this is about responsibility, transparency. This is about appropriate management, which is now the spot where enterprise can prove that that the enterprise where the enterprise wants to prove its integrity, and In most of among most of participants of fund markets, they have access to global investments, and due this is due to their transparency, their clearness when leading their businesses, and it's about being honest. This is just about this principle. You just explain, otherwise you do. If we talk, if we talk when we ask why Ukraine needs it, so besides having our own responsibilities, we are in the crisis level, and it's severe level. It's not just a financial crisis when it happens somewhere in the world. We are at the stage of conflict. We have a specific status of our country. So in order to be developed even when these circumstances, then we require the investments. But we can get those if we are transparent, if we follow some rules which are clear all over the world. Our legislation in general seems our legislation is accepting lots of new items within these latest times, and also it's about facility program, and due to the requirement of World Bank, seems like we really perform some activities. But if we talk about retrospective, how everything was started, then we are, as no matter which spot of the world, we started our cooperation along with organization of economical development and cooperation somewhere in the beginning of 2000 years. And we started to have by that time our first principles, and the leading principle of that organization was accepted. However, we were not members. It seems like we are part of economically developed countries, but by that time the principles included all the things needed so we could cooperate among management authorities along with employers and so on. But this was the level of counseling in 2014. Our next principles, they included some norms, and these led employees, otherwise representatives of employees, to participate in a supervisory board. And the principles of 2014 year, they are current this year, and seems like they shall be something like a Bible in corporate management and development of management system in Ukraine. So there is a strict specification that employees shall be attracted to supervisory board. They shall have their membership as well as representatives of employees. And in 2020 year, when the committee of fund market was approving the code, this was the first code of trade relations in Ukraine, included the norms about a diversity of composition of advisory board, and this was about code of corporate management, due to which enterprises have right to perform their work in case if they represent their shares at fund market, and they have a chance with this to get some investments. In particular, JSC Ukrzaliznytsia in 2024 with the rule from the government announced that nowadays it uses a code of corporate management, thus it can take the responsibilities when performing the requirements. But it happened when the part of these norms was acceptable to JSC, and another part seems like not really, So in the part where the code says that not just counseling must take its place, but along with uh, trade unions and others, but it's also about encouragement to supervisory board and to provide opportunities to become members of a supervisory board. Somehow this part was skipped by Ukrzaliznytsia. Moreover, the changes that were introduced to the statute of Ukrzaliznytsia in 2025, which is current here, they simply not just didn't include the items, but they made some conditions even more narrow, so the employees can participate in advisory body. This was set for previous times, and nowadays they have the right to participate in advisory board when it's about employees' issues with this. Just to sum up above said, it comes when the particularity of Ukrainian legislation sounds like this. We somehow take into consideration something which is profitable, interesting to the stakeholder, but we skip the benefit, which is about added value among employees, and they are executors of long-term requirements. So they are among those people who are responsible for sustainable development. And if to follow the rules among employees at the enterprises is not developed that rapidly and confidently, but if the employees are satisfied with the norms they meet at their working places, it's okay. But if they have any comments, okay, they also can be considered. So if there are any questions, I'm gladly answering your questions. Thank you, Iryna. Another question. So the questions I propose you to have in the end of our discussion. You provided a very nice economical question. It's about whether our creators of rules, norms, and leaders of enterprises such as Ukrzaliznytsia, are they ready to share their responsibilities among others? So let me recall you the name of our meeting. Will employees have a voice in the supervisory board? So this is about readiness of management workers. Are they ready to share their responsibilities, their work with others? And our task is to analyze who are these people who are members of supervisory board. Let me recall you, within latest 10 years, we have some competitions among enterprises as JSC Ukrzaliznytsia. It's about supervisory board, and if to analyze that data, then we come up to conclusion that composition of these people was, let's say, poor when component was not included. Component of employees was not included. So in detail with this aspect, we will hear from Kateryna Izmaylova, who is the latest 3 years was the head of Youth Council of the Trade Union of Railway Workers and Transport Builders of Ukraine. Good day. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for finding your time to join our researchers. Let me say that the goal of my speech is to show how the problems of forming of supervisory board of JSC Ukrzaliznytsia was performed. This means if it was speeded up, otherwise it was slowed down. The focus of my speech was transferring from different stages and ending the JSC Ukrzaliznytsia. Also, we will see we will consider each status in particular, who are members of supervisory boards, which way they were chosen, and how the balance of interest was set. Let me say immediately that in the second appendix, you can see the list of members of our supervisory board, and you will see the years of the responsibilities at work. So I start with 2015 here because at this time the state enterprises, in particular JSC Ukrzaliznytsia, gets a status of JSC Ukrzaliznytsia, 100% of shares that are owned by a state. And at this time, we formed the first supervisory board. The grounds to create it, they were rules 4266, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about JSC for railway transport. It's also about decree of a cabinet of ministers and decree 835, which approved the status of JSC. With all these decrees, the stakeholder is this country, the state, and the cabinet of ministers also led to create supervisory board. With this, November 25th of 2015 here, the cabinet of ministers accepted the first composition of supervisory board. Surely the very first of it included the representatives of ministers and central apparatus of Verkhovna Rada. They were ministries of economical development, fund of state property, and so on. Unfortunately, independent members, representatives of employees, were not coming to the list of supervisory board. With this, we can say that supervisory board of 2015 is mostly, let's say, continuation of a state management, and it's not about independent control. The first changes took their place in 2016, but unfortunately, no significant changes were accepted that year. And the Act of Law 1405 was accepted, and it was saying that supervisory boards of state enterprises, otherwise joint stock companies, they shall have supervisory board members who are independent, and independent ones, they shall be in bigger amount than others, and they must be chosen by means of open vote. So while next choosing in 2018, so the next choosing of members of supervisory board, this was also about status of JSC Ukrzaliznytsia, and we started to have the first open competition, including supervisory board with its independent representatives. So they were foreign experts with international corporate experience. In real, this was a great push, and this brought to management of a company the new approaches and experiences. But we can't say that just independent experts attraction, they can promise you some success in the future, because corporate management is about combination of independency of supervisory board and various industry issues and well understanding of rational context. And we believe that this is needed to improve the situation we currently have. So our supervisory board from formal authority would become another authority that may influence on influence of improvement of Ukrzaliznytsia work. With this, we shall have better institution of independent votes. Second, we shall introduce enlargement of employees, otherwise labor unions, in corporate work. The third is to introduce estimation of efficiency of supervisory board work, as well as its employees and members. And also it's important to provide a balance between international experience and national interest. And surely we shall harmonize our standards due to EU and international partners. And later on, we will hear about it from Pani Yama. I pass the floor. Thank you for attention. My greetings to all of you. Really, the question of participation of workers in corporate management, as it was said today, more and more it becomes essential, actual, all around the world. If we consider the examples of leading experience of leading countries, then we will see that really in lots of countries, participation of employees of corporate management is in progress. If we talk about a global level in the context of international standards in regards to participation in management, then we shall recall what are these principles. And in fact, they stress on development of mechanisms of participation of employees in corporate management must be supported, and this must be led. And among these mechanisms, the participation of with these principles, it's about advisory boards among employees, and what is the most crucial then, it's personal attracting to management board. In this context, we shall stress out that supervisory boards can be different, and we can talk with you about example of Ukrzaliznytsia, otherwise Ukrainian Council of Directors, and there are different approaches depending on the country, how they choose the authorities and their structure. A particular place among standards at global level, they are about principles at management cooperation. So these principles, these leading principles, they are about enterprises of private ownership, and they stress out, they highlight that a state as the owner shall provide its transparency, accountability when functioning of its enterprises. So the provision of the above said must be done by means of attracting of those who are interested in it, and one of those components, they are employees who work at this enterprise. So to continue the logics of corporate management, they are leading principles among enterprises of private ownership, and they highlight the need of development of different mechanisms. And if there are some mechanisms at legislation level, let's say when employees can have their vote in supervisory board, then these mechanisms must be effective. They not just be declared at the paper. So the next level of international standards and regional ones, they are standards that are taken from Europe. And here I'd like to highlight the European the European Social Charter, which is a crucial document. As we know, this was ratified, and our state took the responsibility when performing and following the rules and the requirements from it. And if to talk about membership of employees, which is not mentioned directly, but still this doesn't mean that we shall prove it. It just simply doesn't exist. These exist in different articles, which are 21, 22, 28, 29, and they are about the right provision for employees, otherwise their representatives, to participate when accepting management decisions by means of informing and by provision of counseling. The participation of employees may be held via trade unions, Council of Employees, and representatives in Supervisory Board. So they are about Supervisory Board members. Can I see next slide, please? So as Ukraine moves to European Union, then surely we cannot skip a question of the right of EU, which means which way they regulate the encouragement of employees to supervisory board. And let me start maybe from the primary legislation in EU. This is about Article 153, Agreement on Functioning, and this is about representation of the employees when decisions taken. And this is the component of social policy of EU. In this article, it is mentioned about the right of counseling, and also it's about corporate protection of the rights, including the employee's right to participate in joint management. So if we talk about 2000 here, we couldn't see the direct proof of this proposal, and in fact, as of now, each of the countries, EU countries, regulates it at the level of national legislation. Besides, at transnational level, there was some progress admitted, in particular at the level of EU, and the right to participate for employees was approved by different documents from EU, and they are presented, they are listed here at this slide, and they are about transnational companies. Among those, we shall recall about Directive 2001/86, which is about statute of European company in regards to attraction of employees. If to talk also about encouragement, involvement of employees to in European companies, in joint stock companies, then the main message of these decrees says that when creating these companies, the employees shall have the level of their rights saved. And with the talking about the rights, in particular, this is a decree 2001/86. It was said that there is a right to assign a responsible person when decisions making. Otherwise, they are all the members of supervisory board. With this, to sum up, I'd like, so just to make some logics with my words and to pass forward to Pan Vitaliy, I'd like to stress out when saying that the level of separate states who are members of EU, and if we talk about corporate management, this is not just a theory, illusion, or experiment. This is the right that really exists, and it's followed up. So examples of such countries will be told in more by Pan Vitaliy. And to sum up my words, let me say that a country that moves to EU must take the leading experience of well-developed EU countries where the word of a social state is not just a sound, but it's about some logics, some context in regards to the rights of employees, labor teams. It's about informing, counseling, and participation in management. Thank you. Thank you, Pani Yana, to providing us such detailed research and value. It is valuable to have that knowledge when understanding which way employees and trade unions can influence management of the company. And I believe in these documents we can find some elements that will strengthen the votes of employees. And also I'm thankful to all who follows our event, and definitely our great thanks to railway workers who work non-stop even when we are having some other events. And really today, let me tell you more about the practices of Ukraine in regards to EU, where they have already introduced participation of employees in supervisory boards, and in particular, they are railway companies. So they are examples of democracy, because normally they are big employees number. They are employees in big number in the company, and this index is a great example when accepting the experience of international European standards for corporate management. Before we will move to different slide, let you think for yourselves, what is the share when management of among modern European companies? Maybe next slide will wonder you somehow. So here we take the experience of Austria and Germany, and they are leading EU countries, and their experience is followed by lots of others. With this, we also draw your attention to our neighboring countries, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary. And before, let me specify the next. In 4 neighboring EU countries, there is a right that guarantees that employees may come into supervisory board, and they are specifically railway companies. The Romania was the exception. I haven't found none of the proofs in the documents. So with the lowest level of economical development and with less development of social dialogue, they haven't foreseen this representation of employees in railway companies. So this seems to me, this is a great example of the criteria for countries who want to follow their leading experiences with and comparing to others who are at the primary stages. So let us talk about the numbers. Austria, 4 out of 12 members of supervisory board, they are OBB, they are employees, OBB company. And in Germany, this draws our attention as the number of employees. They are 10 out of 20 members of supervisory board. Will you believe half of the members of the highest management supervisory board, they are just employees with maybe having no appropriate education. When they are just employees, but they can represent of the interests of the company. With this, we have some companies with other numbers of employees. They are Slovakia and Hungary. Maybe they are great examples with this. They are 2 out of 6 members of supervisory board for companies ZSSK cargo as well in Slovakia and Hungary. No, they are having lorry transportations, and now it's delegated by employees. I know that currently they have this question in discussion and they want to enlarge their rights, and government doesn't limit them with these ideas. So they have a guarantee with these questions. If we follow their examples, their experiences, then we will have the quote for employees from 30 to 50%. And let us have our final slide where our proposals to government and state authorities are performed. First question is why employees attraction is essential. I believe this question was explained well beforehand. So there are ethical and questions and they are economical issues which must be more sustainable. So here I'd maybe consider their limitations among employees who say that there is nothing for these people to be done. It's not the appropriate place for them. And in Ukraine, maybe it's something abnormal when attracting simple employees to supervisory boards, when in EU it's totally fine. So first of all, we encourage those who develop and accept the laws to have a separate article that would include the mechanism of realization of the right when participation of trade unions in meetings of supervisory board with a right of advisory voice and including representatives of a labor team to supervisory board. This was second issue, and the first issue is to approve in the law of Ukraine the joint stock companies shall have the right among their employees to delegate their representatives to supervisory board. So we advise to accept both articles, and this mechanism will be in detail determined in the law for joint stock companies. Let me say, out of international experience, they foresee these issues in labor code. Our code was cancelled. By the way, it had some frame directions when management of a company, and it seems to me this shall be filled in as fast as possible, which means if Ukraine wants to be integrated to EU, then we shall draw attention to social and humanitarian components. For the very end, I want to thank you for your attention, and I encourage you to consider this research, this text. You can see in the internet at the website of representative of which is about representative office of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung in Ukraine. So if employees are responsible for the future of Ukraine, in particular, they are railway workers, then we shall delegate them a right to have their vote freely and to build up our future of our country. And with this, we will have our social dialogue and we will have less inappropriate actions in supervisory board. Thank you for your attention, and we gladly can answer your questions if there are those. The mic is on. Maybe someone, yeah, I can see the hand raised. So just one question. Leonid Romyakov. I'm freelancer as well as I'm member of supervisory organization. which is called our version. So my question is next. Is participation of single representatives of the society who are free journalists, are they accepted to supervisory board not as participants? As we know, a nice Naem journalist, was he your Naem was his name? Was he in your team? No. So the question is what is your question? Let me specify. Okay. When meetings, do you have a practice of attraction of independent people who can be socially active and they can reflect the interests not of your leading workers, but in general, who will represent the society who uses the services of your company and who study, let's say, in the carriages, maybe it's too. So this is my question. Okay, let me answer. So how to make a more democratic the attraction of journalists to supervisory board? How to enlarge the stakeholders surrounding? Let me say, I do not like to count others' money, but let me say that they have a very nice levels of salaries with great benefits. And sometimes I'm really upset because these funds, they just designated to same people. And Sergei Leshchenko, for example, he's a great example of people whom you cannot offer black money. But the question is, why don't they have just normal employees, simple workers? So I respect all the journalists who have changed their work, who were professional journalists, and now they became even more professional members of supervisory boards, but still they are approved by cabinet of ministers of Ukraine and supervisory boards, and this is about different picture. So people who are representatives of employers will never protect the rights of employees. You just fix it as a fact. If we address to international documents, then Pani Yana, Pani Iryna, you can say if I'm wrong, but corporate management also underlines the willingness of the wider list of the members, and we can have another dialogue of which way we shall encourage these people. But definitely they shall have employees and they shall have well-balanced approach, which is clear with say no words. If our state haven't realized it yet, then our task is to help it to realize it. So the earlier we will set these changes, the less questions we will have in the future. By the way, if to continue this topic, then we shall recall that seems like next year, starting with next year, Ukrainian enterprises who are having cooperation rights, they will follow some rules, and some number of enterprises is encouraged to this list. So this means they shall have financial accountability, and they shall have also accountability for social responsibility, ecological conditions and terms, and this is about sustainable development. And today, this will be obligatory to us, and if to consider the resources of companies and control, then the accountability is already integrated, which is ecological, and it's about social management aspects, and you can see already how much these enterprises are transparent. But these social components started with next year, will be introduced also for Ukrzaliznytsia, if I'm not mistaken. I may be mistaken, but there is such an obligation for the next year, so this is actual. Next questions, please. Thank you so much. I am Dudin. I am I am representative of Kyiv Mohila Academy of Legal Faculty. My question maybe is off top, but still it's connected to the things we could hear today. So my question about the particularities of enterprise of social dialogue when conflict status, as you know that due to the law on organization of labor partnerships, then the trade unions' role is unclear because trade unions they shall fulfill high expectations in the society, and it's also about strengthening the defense as well as they somehow cancel stop the requirements among the control functions which are for trade unions, and this is about control of firing employees. And today we are talking about the things that are about control of public control with the help of corporations at the level of the corporate management. And again, due to my observations, analyzing these tendencies, it is expected that the changes that are introduced by yourselves, they are fine, but let's not forget that we are in the conflict. With this, my question is as follows. What is your opinion? What are the basic arguments for the advantage of efficient encouragement of trade unions to activities of supervisory boards? Which way it can improve the defense questions, how it can improve the economical sustainability, and what do we currently have, and will this question be still essential when conflict times? Thank you for your answering. If you let myself, I have my comments again. It's about social responsibility, accountability we shall provide. So this moment can be the starting point. So we shall move it to encouragement of representatives of employees to supervisory boards, as we definitely shall introduce our accountability at our way. Again, this is about possibility of variety of supervisory board, which means we shall encourage new members who can provide more possibilities to enlarge their activities, even when the just new strategy is being taken at the very first level. So we shall include all their details. So if there are lawyers, economical specialists, and some other specialists, then it will be not enough, and variety will not be reached by this means. And we shall require a new strategy when some part will be obligatory and other will not be considered. Again, we formally apply, we introduce our accountability. This means I understand that now maybe I'm talking now just about formal things, but if our attitude to accountability will not be as we are currently have, but if we will accept it as we can see some results of the enterprise, and this will be in the access to investment, as we know that there are lots of funds around the world, And if we talk about the sports who are under constant shootings, then they require these funds immediately. So the transparency and considering different aspects, so including international experience and our Ukrainian code, which is based on these leading international principles. This will help to reach the outcomes that will help to sell your shares and to receive their wanted investments, as well as to develop their enterprise and to be developed and to bring their income. This is the goal, yeah, of the business by itself. So in order to have this income, then the social component must be considered either. Thank you. If you let me briefly answer this question. What are the key components will be effective so these proposals will be considered? Maybe not immediately, but more or less Ukraine shall meet in this experience. First, this is about requirements of Ukraine in the context of moving to EU. And these requirements, they are not just about stopping all current issues from legislation. And if we consider international labor standards, and not just labor, but all the standards which are about human rights in general, then as of today, they tightly connected with responsible ones who lead business. This is a top topic at foreign countries. They are principles of leading business, human rights, then transportation, and so on. It's not about just globalization. Thus, Ukraine, to my point of view, Ukraine is at its way to EU, but sooner or later we should consider these questions. Another factor that can work, the need of investments attraction. So leading companies of other countries, they will not cooperate with non-transparent companies where it's unclear how they hold their business, how they support human rights. And let's recall that there are fundamental rights of a human. They are about freedom of trade unions. Combination, this is fixed at International Labor Rights article. And this is one of the fundamental rights of a human. Thank you. Let me myself. Natalia Zemlyanska, head of trade union, All Ukrainian Trade Union for migrants and Ukrainians. Thank you for this research. And let me say that you even foreseen some things, because due to this great scandal that was at the basis of one of the biggest monopolies in Ukraine, and when the government rapidly started to revise supervisory boards, then this research says that we must have representatives of supervisory board members. This is so much essential that it's something bigger than just a dream. And Vitaliy, my personal thanks to you. I would be happy to know that there is just one representative of the supervisory board. With the examples you provided among other countries, we can talk even about bigger number of representatives. And third thing, what's next? The researchers are cool, but you are as experts. What can you recommend to us as trade unions? Because we don't work at state monopolies here, but we have powerful trade unions. So in order to have our roadmap in the future, which plan shall we develop so we can be on a time? Because nowadays we have even the competitions, and as you said, as you mentioned, we shall attract journalists. So what can we do to be on a time and to attract the society's attention and to help the representatives of some employees and supervisory boards start to appear. Thank you. Natalia Zemlyanska, very nice question. So let me say the challenges and the events we currently have, they are about another challenge, about the threat. So attention becomes more and more when solving some issues. I believe that introducement of labor team will be a great step to overcome the crisis as this sphere is currently in it. Yeah, we started to have some market reforms when we introduced a new structure of authorities, but this didn't bring the outcomes we expected, as all these people were connected to businesses, politicians, government, and simply we just shall improve the composition of these teams and those who are encouraged to this process. Here I'd like also to say that the things we discuss, nothing is fantastic. I will wonder you a little, but when preparation of this research, we could figure out that the recommendations we listed, they were announced in particular in Verkhovna Rada Hall, because in 2022 there was a report of temporary commission on overuse of funds at JSC Ukrzaliznytsia, and Yulia Grishina, who is a deputy, she came up to conclusion that Ukraine shall take experience of Germany as leading EU country, and they shall be our example to follow. But half of representatives of supervisory boards, they are representatives from trade unions. So despite its bravery, we still have this topic under discussion, even at the highest levels of our government, which is Verkhovna Rada. And if we talk about democracy, if you have no choices, so let you help people to influence on our agenda. And I believe this is the level of the conflict that will be significantly reduced, as all of you know what's happening in Verkhovna Rada Hall. So somehow we shall decrease these issues and to provide more votes for supervisory boards representatives. If I can add a couple of words in regards to the roadmap, yeah, there's research is the first stage, which will help us to advocate this initiative and to explain it to people who take decisions in person, and maybe to search for some same things that we can meet in different documents. Because in 2024 is when we addressed to Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine with a question for supervisory board, then we were told, you shall regulate the things which do not correspond, and you will avoid any issues in the future. So constant analysis, non-stop work, and to advocate these issues, even if you see there are no great outcomes. Thank you. And myself, Pani Natalia Zemlyak, let me answer how to use a chance. I would encourage all the governmental organizations to consider what is about Energo Atom, for example, and to ask them, do they follow the principle of variety of employees? And this will be a great criteria to see, do we move forward or we just repeat the same approaches. But anyways, this must be a complex along with other criteria. And this must be the methodology of improving the transparency among those who work at enterprise before the decision is taken. Alexandra Krichuk, professional trade union. of energy employees of Ukraine. This is about my proposal to roadmap. The process is more complicated when the roadmaps are already developed, but as of now, we talk about transforming of some companies to JSCs. So this is due to law that must be accepted in Ukraine when you just transfer the company to JSC status, and this legislation act must be considered, and afterwards the employees will really have the chance to announce their proposals, as the law is called particularities of the changes. And as the example we took Energoatom, and some proposals, they were accepted to a new law, as the very first version of the law was not foreseen in this case. And second is when accepting the statute of the enterprise. This is a great chapter, and with the help of trade union, with the example of Energoatom, they have developed a great chapter with the statute of enterprise management. Yes, this is not about participation in supervisory board, but this is a previous version. So it seems to me that if we talk about the stage, then this depends on how much this proposal will be powerful, and will this be heard in this case. Thank you. And Vitaliy, thank you for the invitation. Dear speakers, thank you for your speeches. Dear participants, are there any questions out of the hall? Yeah, I can see at least one question. Alexei Hromov, social organization. In the context of Ukrzaliznytsia, I would like to recall the example of a case when there was even the case brought to the court, and afterwards Ukrzaliznytsia have found afterwards an employee who would compose the request when specifying that his rights were not met. This means Ukrzaliznytsia sometimes plays tricky things when attracting some person, and having proposal let you compose your request, saying that you have inappropriate maybe behavior for sport. Second thing, I believe we shall foresee some things when the employer cannot behave on his own. So I'd like to hear from you, dear experts, how do you see the mechanism of prevention of attracting acquaintances, let's say, yeah? So normally the process is taken much time. This is followed by some stages. Normally, they are general meetings of labor team. Otherwise, they shall be sometimes spent. Otherwise, people vote, writing, ticking the name whom they would like to choose. There are different stages. So all the candidates must be discussed, and this will minimize the risks when another people will obtain their places. As far as I see, we have online question, and let us hear the question online. Pani Iryna, the floor is yours, and afterwards we will hear online question. Thank you. Answering your question, let me say, surely, as of today, due to legislation, Ukrainian legislation, as well as leading principles, international ones, when we talk about membership in supervisory board, which are independent, then they have a competition. This means there may be a representative from the state, it's a representative of maybe JSC, but the question is, there is no transparent procedure. And the very first thing that must be done just immediately after dialogue with accepting some ideas, then there shall be agreement when representatives of employees may come to supervisory board, then we shall immediately discuss this procedure step by step. And this will be a true way, and this will correspond to proposals of international legislation. However, even abroad, in well-developed countries, in different corporations, the representatives of the stakeholder, they are set, they are chosen, but still, this is not just a regular competition as you normally take, but there are some recommendations that everybody shall have equal rights when following some procedure. Thank you. So this is the solution, how to have independent votes. Okay, this means that JSC shall have independent competition, and this JSC shall cover all the expenses. What is your opinion? In order to choose the members of supervisory board, this is maybe a deeper question, and at the national level, we shall have a different approach, because for enterprises, this competition shouldn't be held for the funds of organization, because surely those who pay money, who cover expenses, they are the most interested. Yes, but this is also about national culture, maybe, when keeping some transparency, and it's about appropriate management, and there may be this must be determined not by the agency who sets this competition. Dear colleagues, I am so glad that we don't have any regrets for the procedure. Now, let me offer you to hear our online question, if possible. Will you please announce your question? So the floor is yours.
I assume you mean me. Good afternoon. I am for the Global Ukraine Rail Task Force. We raise money to support Ukrainian railway workers, and I've personally visited your amazing country over the last few years and have undertaken a number of trips to deliver aid to the people of Ukraine. In fact, I will be spending this Christmas volunteering in Ukraine. My background, I have over 28 years service within the rail industry in the United Kingdom, and I have a strong relationship with the trade unions in the United Kingdom. Firstly, you are correct that the world sees Ukrainian railways as a shining light of inspiration. And yes, the people of Ukraine say it's a national treasure. But in reality, the world sees the frontline workers as the national treasure. Without the hard work, bravery, and determination of the frontline workers and their support colleagues, there would be no railway, and ultimately the logistics of Ukraine would have collapsed. So in short, Ukrainian railway workers, in fact all Ukrainian workers, are the national treasure. Without them, we would see a very different picture in regard to the conflict in Ukraine. Unions play a crucial role in representing the interests of employees, advocating for fair wages, safe working conditions, and reasonable working hours. A positive relationship between management and unions leads to increased productivity, reduced workplace conflict, and a more engaged workforce. There are many benefits of a positive union relationship. Worker board representation brings people with a very different range of backgrounds and skills into the boardroom, which help challenge methods. There are issues that need ironing out, notably around directors' responsibilities and whether this would apply to the workers' representatives, so in the like of legal challenges to the board of directors. But this could easily be worked around. You mentioned earlier about money paid to the Supervisory Board and how this will be managed, but there's no reason why the worker representative couldn't donate that money to a charity, perhaps nominated by all of the workers. Yes, there are issues around national legislation, but it should not be a bar to this process. Worker board representation is in place across most of Europe. The UK is a minority of European countries with no specific rights for workers within corporate governance. However, they do have things called employee directors who are voted by the employees to represent all of the employees on the board. Research does show that where worker board representation is in place, the contribution of worker representatives is valued by other board members, and countries with strong workers' participation rights perform better on a whole range of factors. The UK currently lacks a formalised system, as does Ukraine, for worker representation, despite the recognition of this in European countries. But this should be no bar to you proceeding forward with it. We stand ready to support you. I know the trade unions in the United Kingdom are happy to support you and do support you, and we will always stand alongside our brothers and sisters in Ukraine.
Dear Mr. Cassidy, thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for appreciation of everything that is being done by Ukrainian workers for our common future. And thank you for standing with Ukraine, and thank you for being today on this event. Thank you very much. Отже, наші
announced that in Great Britain, they also discuss their corporate management. This is not just a case for Ukraine when the legislation just exists, so it has its own function, but this was not having democracy, appropriate democracy yet. So we have lots of things to be discussed, and we shall continue this dialogue, as it will be much easier for ourselves to exclude some disadvantages. So we sincerely wish to Great Britain workers, employees, to have a great success of performing their businesses. So everything that railway workers do in Ukraine, everything they do, they must have a great international recognition, and we shall have appropriate support so Ukraine would become social democratic country and independent. Are there any comments? If no, let us have our conclusions. So I'm really happy to know that this event brought some new ideas to yourselves. But as you see, there is nothing extreme in above the said. We just talk about usage of national principles of democracy to enterprises. And with this, it's just, let's say, more consequent use of these democracy principles. And in particular, this must be about Ukrzaliznytsia, which, let me recall, is still national treasury. This is not a private ownership. So no matter what are their labor roles, all the employees shall be encouraged to management of this company, and they shall lead it to the better ways. Thank you for being present with us, and see you at next events, and surely let you share your comments due to the presentation that was announced today, and if there are any ideas, let you introduce. And thank you to Ukrainian Media Center for your for being host to